Alright guys, here's some EOC exponent review practice. So let's start by our division rule here. If you have a fraction, that means you're using your division property of exponents. So you can subtract the exponents and use the division, or you can move something from the top to the bottom or bottom to the top to change it from a negative exponent to a positive. So why do I even mention that? Because if you try to subtract 2 minus -2. A lot of you make a mistake with one of the negatives. You leave it behind, it gives you a totally different answer, right? So the easier way is to move up this 3 to the -2, and it'll become 3 to the +2 now. This one stays the same because it's on top and it's a positive exponent. Now we have x to the second power here, and the top one, the bottom one, if I move it up, it'll turn to positive x to the third. And now same thing here, y4 still on top over there, but we're going to move the bottom one to the top, and that -2 exponent will turn to a +2 exponent. Now we just have to simplify this. 3 to the second power times 3 to the second power gives you 3 to the fourth power, which is 9 times 9, 81. Now here, the multiplication rule for exponents is add your exponents. So we have 81, x to the fifth, and y to the sixth. Now because there's no negative exponents, you leave it just like that, you're done. Alright, let me clear this here. Give us space for the next question. So on the next question, same concept, but they're only variables. So in this case, it's easy just to subtract here because we don't have negative exponents. So 12 minus 9 gives you a 3 exponent when you subtract those on the x. If you don't see an exponent on a variable, it's a 1. So in this case, you're subtracting 1 minus 8, which gives you -7 exponent. And 10 minus 15 gives you -5 on the z. Now you can't leave it like that, right? Because it says only positive exponents. So again, to turn it to a positive exponent, make a fraction. Whatever has a negative exponent goes to the bottom, so it can become a positive exponent. And whatever you didn't move to the bottom is still up here on top. So that would be your answer for number 2 here. Alright, I'll leave this one for you guys to practice. And we'll keep it moving here. Now I made sure to include this question here because it looks similar to the one in the middle, but this one doesn't say only positive exponents. It says, what is the exponent on the z? So if they ask you for just the exponent on one of the letters, only do that letter. 3 minus 11 gives you -8. That's the number that goes in here, the exponent on the z. Unless it says no positive exponents, you keep that negative on the 8. Alright, let's move on to the next page here. So this is your multiplication rule for exponents, which is keep the base and add your exponents. You have a calculator that adds fractions. So don't look at this and think, oh, I have to do it all on the paper. Press the buttons on the calculator. 5/6 plus 13/6. And it clearly gives you 18/6, which is 3. So now they don't want the actual answer, right? They want the k value, which is in the exponent spot. So if your answer here is 2 to the third power, your 3 is the only thing that goes in the box because k is only the exponent. Same thing here with the 3. So we add these up. It gives me 16/2, which is 8. So only the 8 goes in the box. Alright, on this side, it's the same process, but since the bases don't match, you need to make the bases match. So it's simple. 8, if you break it down, it gives you 2 times 2 times 2. That gives you 8. So technically, that's 2 to the third power. That is equal to the 8 value. So make sure everything else comes down. Even that 2 exponent, because it had nothing to do with the 2 to the third power, because we just broke down the number 8. Now, first thing you do is multiply these exponents. Because there's no base on the 2, you have to multiply with the exponent it's touching there. And that comes down as 2 to the 5th times 2 to the 6th. Now you can add your exponents, and it gives you 11. Any questions so far? All right, let's keep it moving here. So on the bottom part, there's no variables. It's just a big number with an exponent, another number with the exponent. Because the bases match, you're doing the same process. So you're adding the exponents, which gives you 10 over 5, which equals 2. Now it says no exponents in your answer, so you have to simplify 16 to the second power in the calculator with the exponent button, and you get a big answer. 16 times 16 should give you about 256. And now 36 to the second power, because when you add these two up, it gives you 2 exponent, will give you 1,296. Alright, I'll leave this one for you to practice on your own, but remember you're trying to turn 27 into 3 to the something power. Don't forget the 4 on the outside and to bring this down. The same steps as we did on this one. I'm not going to finish it because then you have nothing to practice with. Alright, now we get to exponent rules. Same thing, right? Multiplication, but you already see the exponents being added, right? So instead of working it the way we did on the previous page, you're doing it in reverse. So because they're adding, you know before this, it was a multiplication sentence. 2.5 to the 2x times 2.5 to the third power. So already we can select this answer right here, which matches our work, and this answer right here, because that 2 can be included inside, and the x could touch on the outside, because it's equivalent. 2 times x is still 2x anyways. So it's the same thing. So we selected those two answers. Now we just have to simplify the exponent portion of it. So 2.5 to the second power gives you 6.25. Make sure the x stays where it is, right, or on the number that it's on. And then 2.5 to the third power gives you 15.625. So now you have to make sure you select the correct answer here. And we have the 6.25 with the x exponent. So make sure you pick the one that has the 6.25 with the x exponent. All right. Same concept here. All right. So let's first get our regular answers with this. 1.5 to the 2x times 1.5 to the 2. That gives you this answer choice already. And now, because 2 and 2 have a common factor of 2, you can factor it out, and it'll be on this number, and the exponent just turns into x plus 1, because you took out the 2 and the 2 from both values up there. So now we can pick the answer, if it's there. Clear this up. So 1.5 right, to the second power, and your exponent just turns to x plus 1. So this one here is correct. And now we just have to simplify the exponent portion. 1.5 to the second power, 2.25. So these are the only 3 answers that are available here. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, now we get to exponents that are fractions. Any exponent that's a fraction is called a rational exponent. You can always turn a rational exponent into radical form, doing top in, bottom out. So the top number goes in here as the exponent, bottom number goes out here in the root. So on the part A here, you don't have to do any steps to get your exponent. The exponent's just there. But on part B, you have to add your exponents first, which gives you x to the 9 over 4. And now you can do your top in and bottom out. All right, same process here, but they put a b where the exponent's supposed to go and a k where the root goes. So you do the same thing and just put your values for each one in the appropriate spot. So here, because there's no base on 2/3, you multiply with the exponent inside. That gives you 16 over 9. And now top in, bottom out would be the 16 as your b, and then 9 out here in the root. And you're done with that question. All right, feel free to go back and watch this again if you don't understand it. You'll get it once you see it a couple times. All right, now same thing here, but you're going to select all the equivalent expressions. All right, so let's just first pick this one that for sure was my typo. I left it the same. And now top in, bottom out, make sure it's correct. The top number should be in as the exponent, so this one is correct. Well, this one is not because they have it backwards. And now 3 over 4, the exponent, is equivalent to 6 over 8, because if you multiply the top and the bottom by 2, it gives you 6 over 8. So as long as the 6 was inside, you would pick that answer, but this is backwards. They didn't set it up correctly. Now 6 over 8 as the exponent is set up correctly here, so we can pick this one. And you're not done. There's one more answer. 3 divided by 4 actually gives you 0.75. So this is also an equivalent expression. All right, over here, top in, bottom out, brings the 5 as the exponent. There's no 5 as an exponent, and on any of these answers, this one's backwards. So now you can raise it to 10 over 4 instead of 5 over 2 by multiplying both by 2, and now this one is set up correctly. 10 inside, 4 on the outside. All right, if this one's correct, the top one has to be wrong because it's backwards. And now just divide your fraction to get a decimal, and it gives you 2.5. So the only two correct answers are these two on this question. All right, same process here, right? Top in, bottom out would be the 2 inside. So we check this box. This one's backwards, so the 4 with the 3 inside is what you check here because they match. Remember, if there's no root, it's automatically a 2. That's why that's 3 over 2. And now here, 4 inside, 5 outside. And then, of course, the last one, 5 inside, 4 outside. Top in, bottom out. Now we get to just simplifying radicals here and radical operations. So you break down the number. Anything that repeats twice comes out because of this square root, opposite of a square. So if you just repeat something twice, it comes out of the radical. All right, so 16 can be broken down many ways. I know I can get 4s out of this 32 by either doing 16 times 2 and breaking down the 16 to 4 times 4. 4 repeats, 2 stays in. So that's your answer. You could have also broken it down to 8 times 4. Leave 4 as 4 and leave 8 as 2 times 4. And now same process. 4 comes out, 2 stays in. Don't break down the 4s if you have another 4, because you can take it out and you're done. So don't break down for no reason. Break down when you want to repeat a number. All right, on this question, it's 150. All right, it could be 15 times 10. That's the easiest one I could think of. And I'll break down both numbers. 3 times 5 here, 5 times 2 there. 5 repeats, so it comes out of the radical. What stayed in there is a 3 and a 2, which is 6, because nothing repeats. They multiply back up to what they are. And now the last one for simplifying radicals here, same process but with variables. So 48 would be 16 times 3. 16 is 4 times 4. And here we have x 6 times, because x to the 6th power would mean x times itself 6 times. So whatever repeats twice comes out. How many sets of x's can I circle here? 1, 2, 3 of them. So 4x to the 3rd comes out. And the only thing that stayed in there is what I didn't circle, that 3. So your answer is 4x to the 3rd, square root of 3. All right, we got 2 more pages to get through. So now here, a radical times a radical, because they're touching parentheses, you know it's multiplication. Radical times a radical, you put them in the same radical. So inside of the radical is the two radical portions. The 5 is on the outside. That's a whole number. That's out there in the whole number spot. So now break down 32 to 4 times 8. Bring down your 8. And now 4 can break down to 2 times 2. Now wherever repeats twice, comes out. If I pull out a 2 and I pull out an 8, then I'm actually pulling out 16 because they get multiplied. So now we have 5 on the outside, 2 on the outside, 8 on the outside. You multiply all of them and you'll get the answer, 80. Just 80 because there's nothing else left. Everything came out. So let's try this one to practice here. 3 stays on the outside. Radical goes inside of the other radical together. And now we can break down 16 to 4 times 4, 20 to 4 times 5. So I can already circle these two 4s because they're going to come out. And that 4 can be broken down to 2 times 2. So I'm going to take out a 4 and a 2, which means all of these get multiplied. 3 times 4 times 2 gives you 24. And now the only thing left in there is this lonely 5 over here. That's still inside of the square root. And now the last part is actually the easier part. These are, you treat them like variables. If they have the same radical, they're like terms, so they can be added or subtracted. So in this case, 5 minus 12 is negative 7, and the square root of 3 does not change because you're adding and subtracting. On this one down here, they don't match, so you have to make sure they match by checking if you can break it down. 9 times 3, 9 becomes 3 times 3. Whatever repeats twice comes out. Whatever did not stays in. So now that square root of 27 turns to 3 square root of 3. And now we can put it together with this one because they are like terms. So 3 minus 5 just gives you negative 2. Square root of 3 doesn't change. Because when you add or subtract, exponents or radicals don't change. So over here, which ones can be put together? The first and the last term only, which gives you negative 8 square root of 5. Now there is no square root of 6, so that just has to come down and it stays as part of your answer. So your answer is going to have two terms if those two numbers are not alike. Same thing if you had an expression, 3x plus 2y plus 5x. You can only put together those values because they're like terms. The other one just comes down. Same thing with radicals. All right, last page. Coming up, this is just rationalizing the denominator. All right, so a radical on a fraction belongs to both numbers. So square root of 5, square root of 6. And now to make the denominator a non-radical, which is a rational number, you just multiply it by itself. Square root of 6. But whatever you do to the bottom, you got to do to the top. So the top becomes square root of 5 times 6. The bottom becomes square root of 6 times 6. So because the bottom repeats, it comes out as just 6. And 5 times 6 is 5 times 2 times 3. Nothing repeats, so it stays in there as 30. So your answer is just square root of 30 over just 6. So same process here, but we're going to multiply by square root of 5 on the top and the bottom. The top just becomes 3 square root of 5 because that's a regular number. But on the bottom you have 2 square root of 5 times 5. A radical times a radical, you put them in the same radical. Now the 5 repeats, so it comes out. It gets multiplied to that 2. And your final answer is going to look like this with a 10 on the bottom. Now if you could simplify 3 over 10, you would do that. But they cannot be simplified, so you're done. That is your answer. So far, so good. And now there is 2 more questions I wanted to talk about here before I cut you off. And it's something like this. A cubic root of negative 512 over, I want to use the exact number, so give me 1 second here. Where is it? I know where it is. Just want to make sure you don't get this simple question wrong because the number is large. There it is. So this question here, I had a lot of issues with this question. Students were confused. So first of all, a radical on a fraction belongs to both numbers. So if there's an answer that has both numbers with a cubic root, like this, then that has to be correct. So this one's the first one we can choose. And now if you divide this fraction, it gives you negative 64. So the cubic root of negative 64 has to be correct as well. So we got a second answer now. And now if you put this whole thing in the calculator, it equals negative 4. If you put this whole thing in the calculator, it equals negative 4. Because the cubic root of negative 64, because negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4 gives you negative 64, is 3 times here. So that cleans up and it just becomes negative 4. So if you want to practice, right, you can just put this in the calculator. Cubic root of negative 125. If you put that in the calculator correctly, this is the opposite of the exponent button. So you press green, exponent, and then 3 equals. And that gives you negative 5. All right. That's about it for exponents and radicals for this video. Let me stop this video and start another.